Hi, everyone. Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We are the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who definitely knows why a raven is like a writing desk, my sister, Meredith. How's it going, Mare?
That's a preview, is it not?
It is. That's a hint. You have to wait to the end of the episode. Maybe astute listeners know what I'm referring to.
I definitely don't know, though.
You don't?
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Oh, well, I don't either. And nor does the questioner. But we will find that out.
Is that true?
In another few days. That is true.
Okay.
All right. But today, we are talking about why your sin ages your appearance, I suppose. Since we are discussing The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde.
In totality.
Yes, we have completed 20 chapters of this singular work by Mr. Wilde, his only novel, in addition to all of his poems and plays that he wrote. But he only wrote one novel, and this was it. And we read it, and you all listened to it, and now we're going to talk about it.
And I feel like where to start?
Well, why don't we just start with sort of an overview of the story. So if you maybe didn't listen to the book itself, as apparently my wife does not listen to the books, but she is listening to the discussion episodes. Hi, honey.
This is for you, Susan.
Exactly.
We love you.
So this was the story of Mr. Dorian Gray, who was befriended by two gentlemen, a painter, Basil Hallward, and a lord, a rich guy, Mr. Henry Wotton.
Also known as Harry.
Also known as Harry. Basil is a painter who fell in love with Dorian and was so enraptured by him that he painted the masterpiece of all masterpieces, the most gorgeous painting anyone has ever seen. So beautiful that Harry even fell in love with Dorian through this painting before even meeting him. Well, as it turns out, Dorian shows up, sees the painting, also falls in love with his own image, and falls in love with the idea of beauty and wishes that this picture would age and that he would always remain as beautiful as this picture is. Dun dun dun, that happens. Harry then meets Dorian, and through his friendship and influence, Dorian becomes corrupted, shall we say?
Yep.
Falls in love with life and beauty and experience.
Hedonism.
And then sets out to sin and experience everything that he can. And as he does, the picture takes on his guilt and sin, and it changes throughout his life. And we have a few major vignettes that we discover in Dorian's life. He does a few things, falls in love a few times, hurts people,
murders,
and in the end murders. And then we wrap up the story with Dorian trying to expunge his soul and eventually destroying the painting, as it's the only thing, I guess, damning his existence. And then he dies and becomes aged himself.
Because he stabs the painting. The painting resumes its youth, and Dorian wears sin and age in a crumpled pile on the floor.
So along the way with this story, we also get some insight into, I guess, Wilde's opinions on some larger topics. I'd mentioned on an earlier pod that he sort of goes back and forth between long soliloquy, sort of the narrator speaking to us, Wilde speaking to us through the narration, and then plot happening. So I kind of summed up the plot happening for you. So I think we could break this down. We can kind of talk about the story itself, talk about some characters, and maybe kind of talk about some of the big ideas that this book delved into. How's that sound?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
So plot-wise, just critiquing the plot and the action. What'd you think of that, Mare?
I felt it was like this, I don't know the right word, fantasy or sci-fi or horror or some, like it snuck up on you with that. Like there was no incantation, there was no curse. It wasn't Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Portrait or anything. Like the fact that all of this was happening, that the picture was taking on it, almost took the reader, I think, by surprise as the characters, because in the beginning, Dorian was very much trying to look for a logical explanation. He was like, maybe some scientific thing can explain this. And he, ruminated on that for a while. And then he decided, that doesn't really make any sense. Okay, it's just happening. Like, this is just it kind of let it go, I think. So it snuck up on you in the fact, or on me, I guess I should say, it snuck up on me in the way that I was like, okay, I just accept it. Almost like magic realism, which is a genre I really enjoy. I've got Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude right here behind me, which is my first like real magic realism book. Anyway, where things happen in a world mostly is fully reality, and then these weird magical things happen, and it's just a part of a world that seems very real. There are no wizards, there's no incantations, there's no spells. It's just, the picture is doing this thing. So, first of all, I just accepted that as a reader. Like, okay, that's happening.
It reminded me, if we hit the Wayback Machine, of the Metamorphosis, our second book that we did.
Yeah.
Where Gregor Samsa turned into a bug, and you just roll with it. Like, there was no, who cares why? He doesn't search for an explanation. It's just, he's a bug now. Same thing here. The picture takes on Dorian's sins. Okay, cool. We're just going with it.
His age and his sins, and it's like good for his whole life, for years. And he's ashamed of it. And not ashamed of it. He wants to hide it. He doesn't want anyone to know that secret. And I don't think he's ashamed of it at first. He's only ashamed of it once he sees what it's been doing to him.
He definitely doesn't want to explain why this picture is changing.
Right. He doesn't even want Basil to see it. In the very beginning, when there is, remember, just it said like the slight cruelty in the corner of his smile. It changed so. It wasn't imperceptible, obviously, because he perceived it, but it was so slight that he was like, is it there? Is there a twist of cruelty in my mouth after he allowed, like, he was so cruel to Sybil Vane and then she killed herself? So it's not his fault. It's never your fault if somebody else commits suicide. So that's like a thing. Suicide's not the answer. It's not your fault if it happens. But he did realize his part in being so cruel to her, which is wrong in and of itself. Like, she didn't have to do what she did.
Well, his first cruelty was, he didn't know she killed herself at that point.
It's true.
His first cruelty was he just rejected her and was angry that she had acted poorly, and she confessed his love to him, and then he kind of yelled at her and said, how could you do this to me, embarrassing me in front of my friends for being such a terrible actress, and then he left.
Yeah. And
that was his first cruelty.
Her explanation was like, I can't be basically false anymore. I can't act anymore because I feel like I know something so real, which is my love for you. And he's like, ugh.
Right.
Boo.
I only love you because you're a good actress.
Yeah. You're Rosalind. You're Juliet. You're all of these other people. And you're never you. Which Henry was like, that's the best kind of woman. When is she Sybil Vane? Never. Lucky you, Dorian.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Henry's gross. And I also loved the end. I loved him stabbing the portrait and him crumpling to his old withered self on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I found Henry insufferable after the first 2 chapters, where he only spoke in epigrams and witticisms and basically memes. He was a walking meme generator at this point. But as a whole, I think it forces contemplation about not just like the obvious about like sin and goodness and what it does to your soul, but art and beauty and works of works of literature, works of painting, works of art. It brought up issues of friendships and society and what it means to be good and what it means to seek forgiveness. Like, it spanned the gamut, like, of things you could possibly talk about that are important in life. This novel hit on pretty much all of them.
Right. From a story and a novel standpoint, that was, I think, more thin. I think it really was, the story was more of a vehicle to discuss some of Wilde's bigger ideas, because story-wise, again, there's not a whole lot there. It's just, things just sort of happen. We time jump a few times. We're just told Dorian's pretty nasty. It's left to your imagination, I guess, to imagine the worst things that you can, I think of things like when he slides the letter to Alan Campbell. Like, it's mortifying, and just, it's so bad, whatever he has over Alan, that Alan then begrudgingly agrees to, be an accomplice to hiding the evidence and melting down Basil's murdered body. So whatever it is, it's pretty bad that he's got on Alan. You had read this before. I never had. So going in, I didn't know what to expect, right? So I knew there was a picture, and I knew stuff happened to the picture. But I mentioned it earlier in an earlier pod. In the first couple chapters before Dorian shows up, I was expecting never to actually meet Dorian Gray. Like, I thought we were going to learn more about Basil and Harry through this Dorian Gray as a secondary thing off to the side. So at first I was a little disappointed when Dorian actually showed up. And it was interesting because in the beginning of the book, he's not the focal character. Harry really is. Dorian's like this empty-headed kid that everybody falls in love with. But then he becomes, poisoned by Harry and poisoned by the Yellow Book. He then takes on agency, I suppose, and begins doing all these things. And then Basil and Henry kind of recede into the background a little bit at that point.
Well, Basil's dead.
He dies, yes, of course. But I mean, he disappeared until he showed up to be killed.
That's
basically
true. And they hadn't seen each other for a while. And he dies because he's like, Dorian, you have to stop this. You have to confess. You have to and not confess to like the police, but he's like, let's get down on our knees. And he makes this very like sad attempt to remember a prayer, and he like puts a whole bunch of them together, and he's like really trying, like,
right.
And I feel like he feels very guilty also, even though I don't give Basil much guilt, but I don't give Basil much blame, but Basil gives himself all of the blame because he idolized Dorian. He made the painting. He believed that Dorian was like basically his muse, because not just the portrait of Dorian, but everything Basil painted in the presence of Dorian was better because he was in love. Like Dorian was his muse. And so whatever heightened state of emotional arousal he could get in to then imbue a landscape with something was because Dorian was there. And so he's like, we need to ask for forgiveness. Let's get down on our knees. And then he stabbed Basil.
Right.
And it's really sad.
He had the audacity to suggest that Dorian needed forgiveness.
Right. That's Dorian's ultimate downfall. It's not that he doesn't recognize the things that he's done is wrong, are wrong, because he does. And he recognizes that he's ruined people's lives. And he has these moments of thinking like, oh, maybe I could go back. And he tries to do good things for the small town country girl that he sort of falls in love with by disassociating himself with her. And he thinks that's his one good deed. And that might change things. But he does not want nor believe he needs forgiveness. Or he's not willing to do the things that we said last episode were needed in order to achieve forgiveness, which are actually admit that you were wrong and confess. He refuses to do that.
Yeah. Which is interesting as he's sitting in a room with a literal visual log of the things that he would need forgiveness for.
Right.
It's not even that he's sort of forgotten and he's like, oh, yeah, I don't need forgiveness. I'm a good person. I do nice things. Like, he's sitting in the room. The picture's right there. He can just turn to it and say, oh, yeah, that's all the things I need forgiveness for. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. You know? He literally can see the ugliness of his soul because of the things that he's done, the actual blood on his hands, you know,
right.
Like Lady Macbeth and out damn spot and like trying to wash her hands and try to get the blood away. He's looking right at it and he's like, no, so I'll just stab it. I'll stab the painting.
Yes.
I'll destroy it. That's the problem. The fact that this object exists is if I can get rid of it, as long as, and then nobody else, I mean, that's it. Nobody else can see. It's the
ultimate cover-up.
Yeah.
He doesn't want forgiveness for the sin. He wants to hide the evidence that the sin was committed. So he's fine with having committed it. He just doesn't want the evidence.
Which makes me think, like, why isn't the painting just a blank canvas? Because he's so empty and vapid. Like, you can't... I don't even know. Like, you can't even see what you've done to yourself or to other people, that you just want to hide it. Like,
right.
No integrity.
Well, I think that's one of the big ideas that I guess we touched on a little bit last episode. But I think kind of the three big ideas that Wilde discusses, and there's probably some smaller ones in there too, but art, beauty, and then I think the concept of soul are sort of the three major ones that I saw in the book that Wilde was touching on. Would you agree or disagree with those?
I agree. Art, beauty, and the concept of soul as and how it is affected by your deeds. Right. Which, I mean, a soul, in the book, a soul is not just a soul that exists, period. A soul can be marred and destroyed as a physical object because it's manifested in the painting, right?
Right. As opposed to being manifested on your person.
Right.
So in Wilde's conception of the soul, there is a way to see it. And there is something about it. There's something about your soul, I guess the deepest part of you, right? That requires concealment. Because throughout the book, so what is Basil's big concern is that he's worried that if people see the painting, they will see, this is his original excuse for not wanting to exhibit it in the beginning of the book. People will see that he has put part of his soul into the painting. They will see his love for Dorian shining through. And that true part of him needs to be concealed.
Right.
When Dorian receives the painting, he immediately, once it changes a little bit and begins to display Dorian's soul publicly, he realizes he needs to hide it and to conceal it. I think we can even extend it to, if we agree, and I kind of do with Wilde here, that a person's soul is written on their face, that you can see a person's goodness or bad. It's not 100% obviously, but you can see in a person's face their soul. Right? If we agree with that, I think we can even take it to when Dorian goes to the docks and he heads to the opium den, he tries to conceal his face. And when someone is doing something that they don't want, they know is bad, for lack of a more eloquent term, you conceal your face. You conceal showing that this is who I am. This is what I do. These things that are some of the blackest parts of life.
Almost like not like the face, yes, but also the eye. That old adage, like the eyes are the window to the soul. Like you can't. Like it's so, looking into people's eyes is intense. And like, because I've worked online for as long as I have, since 2015, and I've been on camera and everything I do is in video and it's recorded and it's all kinds of stuff, the idea of eye contact comes up a lot, because it's like, do I look into my camera? Do I look actually into your eyes? And is it less intense if I stare into your eyes because you're on a screen than if I was in person with you? And also, like, if I reach out my hand, I could touch your face on the screen, whereas probably we would not sit so close that I could touch your face without extending my whole arm. Like, people don't sit that close, but online I can, and it's not nearly as intense. I still find eye contact online intense, because
really,
I do. And I find when I talk about hard things or deep things, the right corner of the room is where I usually look, or I will look around a lot, or I'll look into the camera, which is a little different than actually looking to where you are. Camera you. So,
right, exactly.
And it just depends. It also depends on good webcams these days account for that. And so when you look toward your computer screen, it looks like you're making eye contact. And if you look into the camera, it looks like you're looking up. So they've made adjustments.
Interesting.
I mean, I think so. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but other than the fact that that eye contact can be so intense, and when you're having an intense moment with a person, it's like hard to lie if you've got direct eye contact. It's like, that's why liars avert their eyes, or they do little, because it is a window, I guess, to your soul. You can't hide what's going on in your eyes unless you're like a sociopath and you can make them dead in some way, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's part of the reason I dislike the telephone. Like, I've always hated talking on the telephone, because you can't see the person you're speaking with.
That's why.
Big reason, yeah. Yeah, there's no visual cues, there's no body language, there's no actually seeing the person. Yeah, I dislike the telephone.
I dislike the telephone simply because I don't like the anxiety of calling someone unannounced. I mean, like, hey, hi. I don't like.
But you don't do that anymore.
I do
you
sometimes.
Never call somebody without texting first nowadays.
That's true.
An animal doesn't text first.
An animal doesn't text. It's always like, if like you were to call me unannounced, I'd be like, who's dead? Did mom die? Is she okay? Like, what do you know that I don't know? Why would you call me?
Do you remember not having caller ID?
Yeah.
That is the scariest thing. Like, you actually have to answer the phone. Instead of like, who is that? I'm not answering that. I don't recognize that number. Whatever. Yeah.
And like the question, like calling a friend, like someone answers at their house and like, is Mallory there? Like, is she? I don't know. This isn't her phone.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, if I call Mallory and she answers, it's her.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to. You don't have to have any kind of etiquette on the phone at all. You can just like, hey, what's up? Because you know who the person is, and you're talking to them, as opposed to such and such residence. This is John speaking.
I'm almost amazed when I call, because I still have to call people for work, and I will call, and they'll get my work numbers out of California, even though I'm not in California. It's still a California company and an area code, and they could be anywhere in the country.
Sure.
And I'm amazed when they answer, because I would never. I would never pick up an unknown number on my cell phone. Like, I answer my work, it rings through the computer for work, but I don't answer unknown things on my phone.
Interesting.
Dad does all the time.
Oh, I know. He never picks up.
It's like a holdover.
Which could be wise for him. We don't want to elder scam some guy in, Haiti calling him to tell him he's won $1 million.
Well, he shouldn't answer the phone then.
Well, definitely not if he doesn't. Yeah, I don't mind that he doesn't do it. Oh, he does. I thought he stopped doing that.
I don't know.
He really should.
I see him a couple times a week, and the phone will ring, and he'll be like, hello. It'll be nothing. I don't know. Or it'll be some other political whatever wanting money from him or.
Yeah, I hate robocalls. Like if you call me and you don't respond in like half a second, I've hung up. Because like the robocalls need you to hello, and then you can kind of hear the click and you're like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this.
What's even more terrifying is people who knock on your door. You haven't gotten this yet where you live?
No, we don't. No, people don't knock on my door. What are you talking about?
Especially when I lived in like the Philly area code, but like anywhere where you've got a lot of people, they canvass, especially and they're doing good work. Like they're like, we're going to outlaw styrofoam. I was like, me too. Don't knock on my door. I don't want to talk about it.
Exactly. The worst is the Red Cross. Like, I wish they would just look at my blood donation record and go, oh, this guy donates a lot of blood. Instead, they literally call me like 2 weeks before I'm eligible. And I'm like, guys, look at my blood. Like, I've donated so much in my life. I'm going to donate blood. Do not worry. I will make an appointment. I don't want to talk to you about it.
You have that desirable blood, though, don't you?
I do. I have O positive. Everybody wants it. Sir, there's a critical blood. Yes, I know I am tracking my date. I'm getting my next COVID shot, and then I will go, well, I've already looked up. There's no deferral. I will be able to give right away. I understand. Yeah.
I'm giving you as much of me as I can.
I know. Like, please stop calling me. I give all the time.
Me, on the other hand, I tried to give blood, and they were like, we don't think we can take your blood because back in the day, like, have you ever had chest pain related to heart issues? It's like, totally, yeah, but go ahead, take my blood. They're like, no. Nope, can't take your blood. Speaking of, I get my COVID shot Saturday, my first one.
Oh, very nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, because my husband was like, hey, isn't a heart condition like one of the things? I was like, I don't know.
Probably.
He's like, don't you have a heart condition? I was like,
yeah,
kind of. Sure. I mean, I did. It's fine. I don't know. Anyway, I feel like I'm legit I don't feel like I'm jumping the line in any way.
No. Well, Pennsylvania's line is going very slow. I'm very glad that I got mine at a federal facility. I didn't have to follow Pennsylvania's very slow guidelines.
Yeah. And soon the whole family will be... When can your wife get done? We don't know.
She'll get it at some point in the future, but she doesn't go anywhere anyway, so...
Yeah.
I mean, she's traveling right now. The one time that she's traveling, I say, she never goes anywhere. Oh, okay, she's traveling right now.
Well, we'll
give her a couple weeks. Yeah, we'll give her 2 weeks when she gets back, and then come visit or whatever. Or I'll just bring the kids. Anyway, we're getting off topic of Dorian Gray, the book.
Right. So, speaking of, so we've talked about the book, but I did some research.
We talked about the soul a little bit.
We did talk about the soul. Did you know, supposedly, there is a Dorian? There's a Dorian.
Really?
His name isn't Dorian. His name is John.
That's boring.
John Gray, a poet who met Oscar Wilde in roughly 1889. They fell in love.
Wait, isn't that after the book was written? Don't remember.
So, roughly, I said.
Okay, all right. We'll assume it was before the book was written then, so that he could be
roughly
the muse.
Well, okay. Picture of Dorian Gray. When was it written? 1890.
Okay, all
1889,
right.
1890. So it is said that Oscar fell in love with John. And that John Gray was, quote, wonderfully handsome with his finely curved scarlet lips and his frank blue eyes and his crisp gold hair. And there was something in his face that made one trust him all at once. All the candor of youth was there, as well as youth's passionate purity. Sounds like someone we know, right?
Sounds like a picture hanging in an attic.
And not by Oscar Wilde, but described by someone else as having the face of a 15-year-old boy.
Oh, wow.
Which I didn't know was desirable.
Slightly problematic, but sure. You go ahead on, Oscar.
But also seeing the pictures of this John Gray, I'm like, what did 15-year-old boys look like in the 1880s? Because he clearly looks like a 30-year-old man.
This is this is the 70s athlete phenomenon that we talked about before.
Where they look old, but they're young?
Look up any picture of a football player from the 60s or 70s. Those cats look like they are 55 years old, and they're like 26. You're like, dude, no, you are. Like, I'm serious. Look up any football player from the 50s or 60s, 70s.
It's the facial hair, probably.
No, it's like they're just craggy. They're just like old, craggy, bald men.
It was before sunscreen.
Maybe. And everybody smoked all the time, which does damage your skin.
Yeah, so. Gross. Sorry, smokers, but gross. Anyway,
it is.
Apparently, John Gray is Dorian Gray, although there's controversy about it. And John
literally named him Gray.
Well, John Gray denied it and tried to distance himself from it because...
Is he not into Oscar?
Well, he was.
Oh, okay.
But being gay was illegal. And...
True. I mean, Wilde went to jail.
Up until the 1960s in the UK. 1960s, which I think is bonkers. Anyway.
Well, they chemically castrated you, sure.
Anyway. He distanced himself from it, despite the fact that there are at least a letter where he signed his name as Dorian, like a playful,
okay,
whatever.
Prince Charming.
Right. Because Oscar Wilde fell in love with Lord Alfred somebody. Sorry, I forgot the name. Lord Alfred. Can't remember. Even though in later letters he told Alfred, he was like, actually, I shouldn't have ever fallen in love with you because John Gray and the other guys, like, I'm really a part of their group. And I don't know why I ever wanted to be with you.
It's literally this book, right? It's Dorian hopping from Sybil Vane to Gladys to the country girl to Lady Narborough. Yeah, this is...
Lord Albert or Lord Alfred, I said Alfred. I think it's Albert. Anyway, his dad is, like, mad that his son is with a guy. And he's like, I'm going to ruin Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde's like, you can't ruin me.
Turned him in?
You know what? I'm going to get out in front of this. I'm going to sue you for libel for saying I'm gay. And I'm going to take you to court, which backfires and ruins Oscar Wilde's life because he is gay. Because he can't prove
he is, and he can't prove he's not.
Right, because there's so much evidence to the contrary. Also, this book.
You literally wrote a book that is dripping gay. I mean...
it's a love story of sorts.
Yes.
And he thought he could win because he was so wildly popular. The importance of being earnest was like at the top of the top. And he thought...
That is interesting that he thought he could beat it.
He did. And the lawyers were like, here is a ton of evidence against you.
Like, did they just have to like show a picture of him in his foppish coat and just be like, they look at the jury and they're like, and the jury's like, and trial over? I mean...
What I like was this quote that reminded me, and you'll see it. It said, the ever-eloquent Wilde displayed a dexterous command of the English language and a penchant for witticisms that would eventually incriminate him in court.
Oh, my goodness.
On the second day, Wilde was questioned about a 16-year-old male acquaintance named Walter Granger and whether or not he had kissed the teen. Quote, Wilde apparently says, oh, dear, no. He was a peculiarly plain boy. He was unfortunately extremely ugly. I pitied him for it.
Oh, man.
Sounds
Did you kiss that boy? No, I only kiss pretty boys.
That kid was so ugly. And the lawyers were like, so let us get this straight. You're saying you only didn't kiss him because he was not hot? Basically.
And Wilde's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. But I thought, sounds like Lord Henry to a T. Like the penchant for witticisms that eventually get you in trouble.
Yes. And much like Lord Henry, probably thought himself too smart by half.
Right?
You know?
Like trying to hide in plain sight, but it backfired on you. And then he went to a hard labor prison camp for 2 years,
right?
Which ravaged his health, and then he died shortly thereafter.
I think it would ravage anyone's health. I don't want to go to hard labor prison camp for 2 years.
It was horrible. But this book, I mean, I do not think that this book is a commentary on homosexual life in any way. Like, that's a sin in the painting and anything. But Oscar Wilde has tied his life into this book in a way. And he's saying a lot about society and about...
He definitely pulled back. Like, the first couple chapters... So, having never read this before, the first chapter or two, I thought that's the road he was going down. And then he did pull back from it. Basil and...
It was edited.
And Henry kind of retreated. Oh, that's true. This is true.
And
did you look up the unedited, like the extra...
I did.
200 some, or, whatever they cut.
I did, and I did not find it, like...
What was it? I did not look it up.
It was basically more, like, thoughts about how beautiful Dorian and Basil were and how much Basil really loved him. Like, it was like, okay, well, that's still in the book. Like, it's still there.
It's still in there, right.
Yeah.
It's just...
It wasn't anything I thought, I guess maybe as a modern reader, that I was like, oh, clearly this was the thing that was what they call it.
I mean, just reading what he wrote in the first chapter and what they did publish, I was surprised that got published.
Yeah. It
knowing how Wilde ended up.
It basically was one of the reasons, from what I've read, basically the novel was one of the reasons why they're like, no, clearly he should go to this hard labor camp because he's gay. Like, look at this book that he wrote. It's one, and it was called like Horrible Things. Like, I don't remember the actual quotes. I've got some of them. Do I have one? Some of them up, but basically saying like the most disgusting book ever written is the gist of some of the criticisms of the book. No work of mainstream English language fiction had come so close to spelling out homosexual desire, the New Yorker pointed out in 2011.
I find it interesting that the publishers published it. Did they not face repercussions? No censure for publishing this?
I mean,
that's an editorial decision to take on the book. They could have said, nah, we don't want to publish this. This is too far forward for us.
I mean, I think at the time, Wilde was already a known quantity and popular. And,
true. And just slap his name on it and people will buy it. And
yeah,
I just went with it.
1895. So a few years later, importance of being earnest. He was at the height of his literary career, said. So the guy that he fell in love with was Lord Alfred Douglas. So there we go. Lord Alfred Douglas, whose dad publicly accused him of sodomy and tried and was like telling everybody that. And so Wilde was like, I'm going to get out in front of you, sort of, and take you to court for libel for saying this against me because you're saying I'm doing illegal things, thinking he could win.
Interesting.
And he could not.
He did not.
And it's interesting because...
Hubris, another sin of Dorian Gray that was his downfall. And Lord Henry certainly exhibits a lot of.
Apparently he said, and because the book comments on society, and it's got that whole like intro about society at the beginning of the book. He said the one...
which was added later. That was in a later edition. Yeah. After some of the criticisms came out, Wilde wrote that preface.
Wilde wrote, the one disgraceful, unpardonable, and to all time contemptible action of my life was allowing myself to be forced into appealing to society for help and protection. Of course, once I had put into motion the forces of society turned on me and said, have you been living all this time in defiance of my laws, and do you now appeal to those laws for protection? You shall have those laws exercised to the full.
Interesting.
So he was hoping his fame and popularity and status in society would save him. So he's like, I'm going to do this libel thing. And they were like, but wait. This thing seems to be true
about you. You want our
about
legal system to protect you, even though our legal system says what you're doing is wrong.
Right. It's really sad. I think it's really sad.
Yeah.
And the quote I just read, it was from Time. So Time magazine had an article. So Google that. Time.com, Oscar Wilde trial history.
Interesting. We will stick that in the show notes. And it's also just a travesty that, he was such a good author. And, this is a well-written book, no matter what other things you would apply to it. And I think even in the day, they had to at least recognize the quality of the writing.
Oh, I think so. And I think that's one of the reasons why something that quote unquote is illegal got published.
And has stood the test of time.
Yeah. I mean, Allen Ginsberg wrote Howl back in the 1950s, and his publisher, Lawrence I can't even say his last name, Ferlinghetti, who actually just died not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, last week. I don't remember. Anyway, he was on trial for obscenity for publishing Howl, where Allen Ginsberg was not in trouble at all.
Okay. And that's what I was wondering with Wilde. The publishers got off.
Yeah. The publishers got off, but I think it was like the libel thing backfired where there wasn't anything about the book. The book was evidence, I guess.
True.
But it was,
true.
Oh, this is your lifestyle, and we've quote unquote discovered it.
Through the book that you wrote.
Yeah, and all the, the people you've been with, clearly. I don't know.
Which sad. I think ties into what we talked about with the painting and with concealment of the soul. Wilde had to conceal his own true self and was worried about that and the repercussions of what if someone discovers my true self? Will my soul be written on this painting or in my lifestyle and thus discovered?
I was just having this conversation today about identity. And so at work, we read literature with kids, and a lot of literature deals with identity and and some of the books we're reading are like, where do I belong? I'm torn between two worlds. And we were having the discussion of like, if you try to deny something that feels very natural to you, and you try to repress something and push it away, whether that's like, I belong to this community, either that's race or faith-based or gender-based or whatever. This is where I feel very natural, whatever that means for you. But I'm going to try and force myself to be a part of this other community or do these other things that don't feel natural. And it takes a large performance to do these other things. It never turns out well for people. And I don't think it turns out well for the individual and the people around that person, because then you feel like you've been lied to, even though they're doing it for self-preservation or something. But like one of the books we were talking about was just this, the issue was like a person who grew up in a white community and then Native American community at some point, and then tried to decide where he belonged in his life in this book. Do I belong with my original biological family or the family that raised me, which is not my biological family? And I feel torn between these two worlds, and trying to repress one side or the other doesn't turn out well. And I feel like that's what's happening in a way in Dorian, except maybe it's pushed to the extreme because he's trying to not deny anything at all.
Well, he's trying to sample everything. He's seeking out. So, they kind of touch on it when Lord Henry talks about art and how, poor people don't have art. The lower classes have crime because they're seeking out that experience and that high that we get through art. They get through crime, right? I mean, Dorian, it's not so much that he's denying himself or his identity and seeking it out, because I don't think he was all these things, right? Like he was a gemologist, and he was into music, and then he was into lace, and he was into opium, and he was into murder at some point. You know, is any of that? I think that's more showing. And this is where I'm wondering, like, what is Wilde saying through the person of Dorian, right? I mean, Dorian doesn't end well. So is he critiquing hedonism as a concept? I mean, he's certainly not. I wouldn't think he would encourage us to seek out all these experiences, right?
No,
because
I don't
Dorian
think so.
sought out every experience, and it didn't end
turn
well
out
for him. Right.
Even if he hadn't destroyed the painting and died and turned into the crumpled mess that he wasn't happy. He wasn't fulfilled.
No. I think that is more, maybe this is more the lesson, I guess, that we can take from Dorian Gray, is finding, was Dorian searching for like a purpose? I mean, we look at our major characters in this book, right? I would say the big three, right? Dorian, Henry, and Basil. Dorian and Henry don't seem like happy people. They're always searching for something, whereas Basil knows himself. He's a painter, and he displays or expresses art and beauty, or expresses beauty through his art. And in the case of the painting of Dorian, expresses a bit of himself, and that was a bit too much. But he's the most stable, normal, I'd say happy character in the book.
Most fulfilled, for sure.
Right. And the point is, he has a purpose. Dorian, Henry even says to Dorian, I'm glad that you don't create anything. Yeah. Because then this perfection that you are would be marred. And I think that's, so it's very interesting that the characters that most resemble Wilde and his life are the ones that end badly, and I'd say would be the ones not to emulate. So could that be Wilde's consternation over who he is and who society says he should be, and his lack of fulfillment in who he is in this society? And so he's expressing it through these characters, like, I wish I could be like Basil, who had this defined purpose and this joy in life, but instead I'm Dorian and Henry, and I'm always sarcastic and, trying to think of the next fun thing to say or the fun thing to do, and I'm just never happy. Even though Wilde himself was a creative who writes and expresses like Basil, I guess that didn't fulfill him.
But he could never be himself. Like he was married to a woman, and he had a kid, and I haven't, other than knowing that he was married with a kid, it's never like, and he loved his child to the utmost, like, whatever.
Was it more of a Lord Henry marriage?
Right.
When Lord Henry was married, he didn't have any children in the book.
Which
maybe Wilde loved his child enough to, like, leave an analog out of the book.
When you're forced to deny what is a like, and I don't want to be taken to extreme. It's not like when you're forced to deny who you are in a way that is a healthy way to be and a normal way to be, and you can't because society has made some law against it, it doesn't turn out well for anyone. Now, some people, have I don't want to just do a blanket statement. Like, the most natural thing for you to do is the right thing for you to be.
Right.
Because, Ted Bundy thought it was super natural to murder people when he got the urge. Or maybe he didn't feel like it was natural, but it was happening to him. Whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, normal consenting behavior of regular adults. So I don't think Oscar Wilde should be kissing 15-year-old boys. I don't. Or 16 or whatever he thought it was. But he's
what I hear you saying is that furries are perfectly natural and society should encourage them. That's what I'm hearing you say.
I mean, if it is consenting between furry adults and they keep it to their own furry selves.
Yes.
I have no hate in my heart for them. I do not want to attend one of their gatherings, but no hate in my heart.
No, not at all. I definitely would not. I would not enjoy that.
It is definitely a thing, though.
It is definitely a thing.
I feel like ultimately this book tells us like a much more simpler tale. Like your transgressions and your sins manifest in some way. And they will mar your soul. And whether or not you can see it doesn't matter.
It's there.
It's eating away at you somewhere, somehow. And
right.
Can you live with that? What are you going to do about it? Kind of deal?
I think there is sort of the unspoken, not completely unspoken, but the ruminations that Wilde never got onto as to the nature of sin and what is sin and what is going to mar your soul and eat away at it. Because in order for there to be a transgression or a sin, there has to be, we talked about it last time, with the forgiveness, there has to be some higher authority outside of the system, outside of the self, to provide that forgiveness. Well, it's the same thing. There needs to be something outside of yourself to define that transgression or that sin, or else anything is sin or not sin. I mean, then Dorian could do whatever. If there's not, right? If there's not something that's saying this is a sin, then Dorian's actions, I think, would not mar the painting, because to him, perhaps these different actions, I don't define them as sin, so why should that mar my picture? I don't, it's only society or religion or what have you that is defining this as a sin, and therefore that is what mars my picture, and that is what I would have to ask forgiveness for. But Dorian doesn't see it that way because he doesn't feel he has anything to ask for forgiveness from. So if he doesn't think he needs forgiveness, then to him, these transgressions aren't transgressions, so why does the picture change? Wilde is implicitly saying there is something outside of the system that defines it, but I don't think he ever really gets into it in the book.
Yeah.
So
we didn't talk about that in one of the episodes.
Yeah, I know.
I wasn't ready for that one.
No,
wow.
a lot of deeper stuff you could get into this book. So this is obviously a very meaty book. So
as short as it is,
right? It is a very short book. So what do you think? Is this a slept through, or did you stay awake for this one?
I stayed awake.
Did you?
Oh,
wide awake?
Yeah, I did. I mean,
I'm gonna say I was drowsy for this one. Yeah.
All the good conversation that it spurred, you were I mean, I was kind of over, like, I could skim through the witticisms of Henry, so I don't know.
So I say that because it wasn't like a page turner. Like, I didn't find, the story was very thin. There wasn't a whole ton of story there, right? This book, I felt, required me to think. Like, it required me to actively be engaged in the reading. Like, I couldn't just read it and go with it. Looking back on some of the other books we've done, like Call of the Wild is a pretty much straightforward adventure story. Right? Like, there are some bigger ideas in it and some bigger themes of, friendship and whatnot. But it didn't require me to really dig and see what the author was saying. Northanger Abbey had, witty dialogue and critiques of society. but it was a fairly straightforward story of what is Catherine going to do and how is she going to end up be happily married to Tilney. And again, I didn't have to really think. This one, the metamorphosis a little bit, it was a very short book, but it was saying something, but a little more under the surface, not quite. You really had to kind of, you could read the metamorphosis without having to engage with any deeper ideas, I think.
Okay.
But this one, I felt the big ideas were there, and because the way Wilde structured it with, plot chapters and big idea chapters, you really had to, he was forcing you to engage with the idea of, hey, I'm not just telling you a story, I'm actually saying something more. Whereas I think, say Metamorphosis, hey, I'm saying something, but here's this fun story about a bug that you can read, and yeah, there's more in there for you to pull out, but you can just read the story.
Right.
This one, I don't think you could just read the story without having to engage your brain on this one.
And that made you fall asleep.
Right. Well, I mean, in our rating system, I'm like wide awake, excited, great book, or sleep, terrible book, I didn't enjoy it, didn't get. This was like sort of a down. Like I had to work at this one. This one was more of I had to actually work at this book.
I feel like The Awakening was that way too. There was clearly deeper themes in The Awakening. It was not some fun story of a lady's summer.
No, true, but I don't think it was quite explicit. Like The Awakening, I think leans more towards Northanger Abbey, where it's like critique of society within this story I'm telling.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is, I have these big ideas, and I'm going to drape this story over it. See what I'm saying? That's how I kind of.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I stayed awake for it more this time than I did the first time. The first time I did it, I was like, I'm going to put a book on while I'm on the elliptical at the university gym.
No.
And it was
See,
not
this
that
is
kind
not
of
the, This is not the book to put on for the gym.
Story.
You actually have to engage on this one. So maybe my wife was right to skip the read aloud chapters on this one. Just stick with
heavy enough
episodes.
just to listen to us try to figure it out.
Right. Exactly.
But we've got
and I don't think we did figure it out.
No.
I don't think we figured it out, but I think we made some headway on some big ideas. But what do you guys think? What do you think the big ideas were, and what did you think about them? Why don't you hit us up on any of our various ways to contact us? We have social media. Did you know that? We are at CYSTpod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We have email. cystpod@gmail.com. Still have not gotten any emails from anyone under 25. That's our standing challenge.
Though, do you email anyone? Like, just as an email? Like, hey, buddy, do you email your friends?
I absolutely do not.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I realized we made this challenge. Does anyone under 25 email? And I thought, I don't email. I barely email for work anymore. It's all Microsoft Teams, and it's chats, and it's whatever. I don't email.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think anybody does use email anymore. That is a good point.
No.
We did get an email this week. We did. It's definitely not from someone under 25, though, and it's kind of a cheat because it is from my dear wife, Susan.
Oh, yay!
And yay. She sent us as is her wont, she sent a very long email, which I cannot read in totality. But, she said that, in the last episode, Mare, you suggested that if Dorian had confessed to Harry, that he would have instantly aged and taken on all the effects of his sinful choices. She doesn't believe so. Mm-hmm. She thinks that the picture was the visual of the confession work that Dorian needed. So kind of like that log. It's the log that we had kind of talked. She says that he would age, but he would be freed from the ill effects of that once he had confessed. And she ties it to some personal stories about how I tell her that she really looks ugly when she's angry.
What? You're just going to gloss over that? And what? You tell your wife that?
Her whole... she knows that. She wrote it in the email. But her whole aspect like her face crunches down, and it's just like, wow, you just aged 20 years.
Well, who looks hot when they're angry?
I don't know. Not me. Well, maybe I do. But I don't.
No, you don't. I don't know what you look like angry, and I would not ever say that you're hot, but I can tell you don't look hot when you're angry.
I know. Do you know who looks hot when they're angry?
No.
Bruce Banner.
No, he doesn't look hot. He looks green and big. And
yeah, I think he looks better. I don't know.
Better?
He's jacked. Especially like when he's like Smart Hulk in Endgame. He's like hanging out and he's like, hey kids, what's up?
Yeah, but doesn't Bruce Banner say he's always angry?
That's how
okay,
he's not very true.
Hulk.
Well, Mark Ruffalo's hot. What can I say? So anyway. So that was our one email this week. So get those emails in, folks, and we will discuss on pod.
I kind of like your wife's idea though, that the confession is setting you free from the horrific effects. So if you confess, you don't get the ill effects because you've done the good thing.
I mean, that is literally the conception of confession, right? Confession and forgiveness. You are then freed from the sin. The sin is erased.
Right.
And not brought up again.
But just because we're physical, this is a magical thing sort of happening in the book, but if we confess, we're still going to wear our issues. If we are agreeing that you wear your stress, you wear your anger, you wear your
but can't you also have your joy shine through in your aspect? So if you are freed from those burdens, would not then your face and body and posture and entire aspect radiate your newfound freedom and
that's a good point.
Cutting loose of the weight you're carrying?
I used to work at an animal shelter, and I had a supervisor, who quit. And I saw her a few weeks later. She literally looked different. I was like,
see, there you go.
Oh, I was like, you're glowing. You look great. And it was because she was free of the stuff that was happening in her work life. So yes, maybe your wife's on.
That was
something.
Me pre-retirement and post-retirement. So yeah.
You do wear a younger man's age, a retired man's age, perhaps.
This is true. A very young retired man's age. Yes. Very true.
But don't we have a new book?
We do have a new book, and I teased it at the beginning. We actually have 2 new books. It's not just one, it's 2.
You teased it? Oh, I did tease it.
I did tease it. I said that why Raven is like a writing desk.
Right. Because it can produce a few notes.
Well, these are posited.
Right?
The Mad Hatter doesn't actually know.
Oh.
Who questions in the book.
They have quills.
Which we will read shortly. That's right. We are reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, immediately followed by Through the Looking Glass. They are both very short books. We will cover each of them in 2 episodes each, so it'll be a 4-episode arc where you will get 2 episodes of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, followed by 2 episodes of Through the Looking Glass. And I think the actual title is Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There.
Don't listen in the dark because of the Jabberwocky.
Oh, yes. So I'm very excited. This is absolutely one of my favorite pair of books. I'm actually, if I have to rank them, I'm more of a Looking Glass guy than a Wonderland guy. I don't know how you feel about the 2.
I was just always afraid of the Jabberwocky, so I don't know.
Okay, all right. I said last week, book that everyone knows, but maybe you haven't read. Mm-hmm. So I think pretty much everyone is very, very familiar with the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland, which is actually a meshing of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. It's actually, they took a little bit of each and sort of mixed it together in order to create the Disneyfied version, which I also love. A fantastic Disney movie. One of my favorite Disney movies. I could watch that at any time. Great movie. But one of my favorite books, and we are going to be tackling it soon.
Which one's a great movie? The cartoon Alice or
Yes.
The Tim
the
Burton
original.
Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, no. Goodness, no. What? No.
That's not bad.
Not bad. What? But then, like, through the Looking Glass, like, it's like some action adventure where she's like, I don't know. No, thank you.
There is a great
I'll
line
stick with the Disney
where the
version.
Red Queen, like, says, "My jabber baby walkie. What's happened to my jabber baby walkie?" And I just think it's so cute. I like to say the words jabber baby walkie over and over.
Oh, my goodness.
Anyway.
No, I am talking about the original 1950
cartoon.
52, 53, somewhere in there, early 1950s, Alice in Wonderland animated Disney, which is phenomenal. Phenomenal. But yes, so in the next day or two, you will see it in your podcast feed. For next time, we will read the first 6 chapters of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And we will go down the rabbit hole and enjoy that. I'm excited.
I am too.
I can already tell you I'm going to stay awake for this one because I've read these 2 books multiple times. Love them.
I feel like I've read them. Like, we talked about this. Dad read them to us, or we had them. You have our copy.
Yes, we have like a nice hardback, colored, illustrated copy.
Yeah.
From probably the 70s or 60s, somewhere in there. I don't know.
But I don't remember it. I mean, I sort of have memories of the pictures and being afraid of the picture of the Jabberwocky and afraid of Alice stepping through the looking glass and thinking, like, don't do it, girl, don't do it. But I don't, like, I feel like I'm going to be reading it for the first time also.
Perfect.
So I'm
pumped. That's the kind of book we want.
Yeah.
This is going to be great. Yeah, so look for that in your feed. Anything else for this week, Mare?
No? Nope.
All right. Well, this has been Classics You Slept Through. So until next time, instead of getting drunk in Florida on spring break, why don't you all drink in the natural beauty of our country at any one of our 423 national parks?
But you can't actually drink in them.
You could drink in the beauty.
But not in the whiskey. So don't do that.
Don't.